Thanks again, everyone, for being here tonight for our DC campaign launch of Make Polluters Pay. I'm really excited that you all are spending your Wednesday night with us, and let's get this thing going. Tonight, we're going to start by explaining what exactly we mean when we are saying Make Polluters Pay, and how this campaign fits into a national campaign to make polluters pay all around the country. Then we're going to talk about how we're bringing that fight here to DC. And then we'll do a training about telling your polluters pay story and how you can use that to support our campaign moving forward. And we'll wrap up by letting you know how you can stay involved with the campaign in the months to come. So let us get started. I think it's helpful as we get the conversation going to really just center ourselves in why we're here and what we're talking about. So I'm going to play this short video, which comes from 2019.
During DC's morning rush hour, commuters competing with rushing water.
The road literally just started becoming a river.
Torrential rains bringing flash floods, washing out roads and stranding cars. Kids carried to safety by adults. Washington receiving almost a month's worth of rain in a single morning. 3.3 inches in 1 hour, more than an inch of rain than the previous daily record set back in 1958. A stream in Alexandria, Virginia rose more than 11 feet in 1 hour. Backyards looking like lakes and pools morphing into muddy ponds. And in the metro system, a waterfall cascading from the ceiling. While the elevators at the Pentagon stop looked like showers. Some drivers taking risky chances, requiring dozens of rescues.
People made the mistake of trying to drive through high water.
In Washington, no deaths were reported, and residents keeping a sense of humor.
You trying to go fishing?
Hans Nichols, NBC News.
Okay, so that was a video from some of the really extreme flooding that DC had back in 2019, which is one example of the kind of climate disasters that we're going to see more and more of in this region. And 6 years later, the climate crisis in DC is still here and the climate is still changing. So we have warmer temperatures all year long in the DMV, and that contributes especially to extreme heat during the summer. Extreme heat is the most sort of dangerous form of extreme weather. It causes the most deaths in folks. And in DC, we really see the worst extreme heat hitting in the summer, especially in wards 5 and 8. We're also getting more rain than before, and it also tends to come in more extreme bursts between periods of long droughts. And this makes the rain even more of a problem when it comes to flooding because our natural environment is not as ready to soak up the water. And so it's causing flooding across the district, particularly in neighborhoods in Ward 6 and 7. And just generally, our seasons are changing in DC so much that we're in a new planting zone. So if you're a gardener, when you're supposed to plant different types of vegetables is actually shifting in our region. It's changing what kind of plants are native, what kind of trees survive the best here in DC. And we're also having, warmer falls, which we're experiencing right now, which means we have longer allergy seasons, and we have warmer winters, which means our mosquitoes and our bugs stick around longer. So what we call climate change, we're really feeling in this like day-to-day change in the way that we experience our weather. And this is really just the beginning. So according to current projections, in a few decades, our summers will be more like what they are right now in the Deep South. And in a few decades more from that, it'll be like we are in Texas today. And that's a huge shift in sort of what it looks like to live in DC and the kind of city that we need to have. So sometimes, climate change can feel far away or abstract. We used to talk a lot about like polar bears in the Arctic or the Amazon rainforest, and those things are still important. But the truth is climate change is just happening around us every day, and we feel it in the change of weather. Like as an example, I used to have to bundle up in a winter coat to go trick-or-treating for Halloween 15 or 20 years ago. And today it's just warm enough to go around without a jacket. And that's climate change. the subtle shifts in weather that impact our daily habits and our lives and our traditions, that is experiencing climate change in our everyday lives. Climate change, of course, is also felt in more extreme weather events like that flooding in the video, or when Sligo Creek flooded this summer and Georgia Ave turned into like a river of rushing water. Um, and those kinds of more extreme weather events and the most extreme sort of once in a lifetime disasters are becoming more and more common, and we're going to experience them a lot more than once in a lifetime. So all of that change adds up to changes we have to make too. So it impacts our built environment, right? Our streets, our bridges, rivers and sewer systems, and the water all around us. And we need to upgrade our city so that it can actually handle this new weather and be prepared when these big disasters strike. Making those changes requires funding, of course. So the kind of biggest dollars that are spent is often after we experience extreme weather. So this could be stronger hurricanes, extreme heat waves, really dangerous flooding. Those are the kinds of things that really cost a lot of money. And nationwide, the US spent over $180 billion last year on what we call billion-dollar disasters. So that number is just counting what is spent on a disaster that costs over $1 billion to address. There's still obviously smaller disasters that cost less than that, and all of that needs to be addressed as well. In the district, this mainly means that we have to prepare for flooding. That is the number one way that we're feeling sort of extreme weather in the district. But it also means addressing sweltering heat that's dangerous for folks that work or live outside. It means funding EMS services to respond to disasters during heat waves, and so many other things, including some projects that are already underway and some that have been estimated that we need. So the Potomac River Tunnel project is a stormwater management project that's budgeted to cost $819 million. We're going to need over $100 million to build seawall to address rising and coastal flooding. So those are some really big numbers for how much we need to spend on just one project. $819 million on just one project is a lot of money, and it's a big number. But honestly, it pales in comparison to some other numbers, which are fossil fuel profits. So the world's biggest polluters are raking in tens of thousands of dollars in pure profit every single minute. What you see here is the profit per minute of some of the world's biggest polluters from the end of last year. And to kind of put this in perspective for folks, if you just look at that number from ExxonMobil could pay for that entire $819 million project I just talked about with their profits from just over 10 days. In 10 days, they can pay for that whole project, a project that the district is going to pay for through tax dollars for years and years and years. Tax dollars meaning your money, by the way. So that's also just one company. ExxonMobil is just one company out of dozens that do business in the district. And that business is pumping climate change causing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere every minute, just as fast as the profits roll into those companies. So when I was a kid, my mom had this 2-finger rule. So if we were in a store or something, we were allowed to touch things on the shelves or anything, but we could only ever just use 2 fingers. And why would that matter? Well, because where I come from, if you break something, you have to fix it. You buy it. So it's pretty hard to break something with just 2 fingers, it turns out. And so that's why we had that rule. And if that kind of logic can apply to a 6-year-old, then it can certainly apply to these multi-billion-dollar fossil fuel companies. They cause climate change. They need to pay for the chaos it's causing in our neighborhoods. That's really the underlying foundation of what we say when we're talking about making polluters pay. And there's a legal framework for this. So you may have heard of a Superfund site. These are places where companies have polluted the ground or water with toxic chemicals and are then held responsible for cleaning up the site so that it's safe to use once again. And the theory underlining the movement to make polluters pay is basically that our climate is one big Superfund site. And so big oil and gas companies that created that mess need to clean it up. In this case, basically, greenhouse gases are your toxic chemical that's flooding into the atmosphere, which is the Superfund site. So that's the theory behind making polluters pay. Climate change, as we know, caused by greenhouse gases that are emitted by some of the biggest corporations in the world. Adapting to it is costing all of us directly and through taxes, as our government tries to prepare the district for changes in weather, extreme weather. But really, it should be big oil and gas paying to clean up their own mess. So that is what we're talking about when we are talking about making polluters pay. And now I'm going to pass it over to Mustafa to talk about what this fight looks like around the country.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mustafa. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the Director of Campaigns and Strategies here at the CCAN Action Fund. And I'm also a proud member of proud resident, I should say, of Ward 4 in DC. So it's great to be with you all. So you might be asking yourselves, like, can we really do this? Can we pass climate superfund legislation here in DC? And the short answer is yes. That CCAN Action Fund has been working on this legislation for about 4 or 5 years at this point. It was initially drafted as federal legislation with Senator Chris Van Hollen, and that legislation has inspired states across the country to be taking action. And so you can see from this map, New York and Vermont have already passed a version of this legislation. And it's currently under consideration in a bunch of states, including in Illinois and Maryland, Maine, Massachusetts, New Jersey, California, Minnesota, Tennessee, Oregon, Virginia, and now we're going to be introducing it in Washington, D.C., which is very exciting. And it follows a clear legal precedent in our environmental regulation, and the polluters pay principle is employed in all of our major U.S. pollution control laws. So thinking about like the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, and the original Superfund program regarding the cleaning up of abandoned waste sites. So holding big polluters accountable for climate change is included in also like the majority of our international treaties. There is legal standards for this globally as well as domestically. So these climate superfund bills would follow a similar legal structure, and New York's and Vermont's have been challenged in court, and they're largely claiming things like preemption, federal preemption based on the Clean Air Act, and that it interferes with like the state's sovereignty and their interests. And they're also, making complaints about violations of due process, the Commerce Clause. But all this to say that that we believe, as well as the Maryland Attorney General agrees with us, the state's attorneys generals in many of these states which the legislation has been produced have said this is on sound legal ground. And basically, what that means is that the legislation does not regulate the conduct of businesses, and it doesn't regulate particularly because these businesses have to have a relationship with the state. It doesn't that's not an issue here. Doesn't regulate their due process rights, and the challenges in similar cases on due process rights have not been successful. And courts have upheld laws requiring payments from companies that contribute to harmful environmental impact. So actually, there's a clear precedent there as well. And then on the issue of preempting the Clean Air Act, we think that this is going to stand up in court because the goal is not actually to regulate any greenhouse gas emissions, but it's just to make the companies pay for their historical emissions. And that's where the caveat has seemed to, the line has been drawn with a lot of these decisions. And the last thing I'll say is that this is akin to the harm from tobacco companies and the years of advocacy, organizing, and litigation around the harms that they have caused. We think this is going to cause a similar trajectory, and um, for us to just keep in mind that we're setting in the DMV, we've set records this year, like 25-year records for the amount of flash flood warnings that have been happening in the region. I mean, even through July, I know it was over 100. I think it was 109 flash flood warnings that were in the region. We've had significant flooding in the last several years in places that haven't experienced that flooding. Like, for example, in the area, Southeast Baltimore has experienced significant flooding. Black neighborhood had 150 homes destroyed as a result of a consequence of flooding from Ellicott City and subsequently the river overflowing there. And then even in my neighborhood here in DC, most recently, we've with this past summer with the Sligo Creek in July rising 10 feet within 30 minutes. My neighborhood going down in Brightwood, going down south on Georgia Avenue, we had so much water coming down the street and the neighborhoods being flooded. And so we think that the same reckoning is going to be happening for for these fossil fuel companies, as has happened with the tobacco companies, both in our legislation as well as in the courts.
Okay, so how do we bring all of that energy here to DC? Well, first of all, it is going to take a lot of organizing of people in DC who support this. So we need all of you to be a part of that. And that is what we will get to on this call as well. But policy wise, basically, the first step is determining what the cost of climate damages are going to be in the district. How much is Washington, D.C. going to need to spend to adapt to our new climate and prepare for extreme weather? So once we have that number, then we can require all companies that fit into 3 requirements to pay into a super fund. So we're looking for companies that have, one, emitted more than 1 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions. These are the big polluting companies. And that has happened between a relevant time period. So this is a time period of like generally around 2000 to 2020. And we're selecting a time period so that we can get really good data about emissions during that time. And then obviously this needs to be a company that does business in DC so that we have business with them as a government. So we identify all of the companies that fulfill those 3 requirements. And then those companies are required to pay the DC government according to how much they emitted, so how much they contributed to climate change over that period of time. And then we have a super fund with millions and millions of dollars that our Department of Energy and Environment can administer and distribute resources across the city through grants and programs. So that's essentially how we get from where we are to where we want to go. We need to figure out the cost, and then we figure out the companies that it applies to, and they pay into the fund according to how much they polluted. So how are we going to get there? Well, the first step we're doing right now, we are launching our campaign and building a movement of people who are excited about making this happen. Then we need to work on the study phase. So we need to pass legislation through the DC Council to do this study that helps us figure out the climate damages in the district. We need to get that study funded and then get that study done so we have our number. And then we need to create our super fund. So once we have our total number, we'll pass another round of legislation to create the super fund. And in that legislation, we want to include lots of requirements and guidance about where the money needs to go. So as we continue this campaign, we want to talk to our neighbors and the most impacted folks in DC and really understand the kinds of programs and support and things that just need to happen in the district that are not happening right now. And all of that can be put into our final version of legislation saying we're making a fund and this is the kind of stuff that the money needs to go to. And then the last and final step is we got to get the money out the door. And so we think it's really important for us to stick around and make sure that the money that rolls in from big oil and gas is being spent well by our Department of Energy and Environment, and that it's spent directly on what our community really needs the most. Okay, so before I wrap up, I just want to address some of our most frequently asked questions about the campaign that might be on your mind, and before you get the chance to ask them. So first, some folks wonder about, is this just going to end up raising costs because you put this, fine or fee towards companies, and a lot of times those sort of things just get passed on to consumers through higher prices. Well, this is why we have that requirement of only applying the Superfund rule to companies that polluted over 1 billion tons. We wanted to target the companies that are the most responsible, that emitted the most. But we don't want it to be everyone, because we want the companies to still be competing against each other. When they have to compete against each other, the companies that are responsible for paying DC, they can't just raise their prices, because the companies that aren't paying this fee won't want to raise their prices. And, you can just go to the cheaper gas station, or if this is happening kind of more at the supply level, then the distributor can just buy the cheaper source. So by only applying this fee to our biggest polluters, it helps to maintain the competition that will keep prices down for us. Secondly, you might be wondering, isn't this already happening in DC? I feel like I've heard about this before. And you'd be right. You may have heard about the Polluters Pay lawsuit. So there is an ongoing lawsuit that the DC Attorney General has brought against some of these really big polluters. And a lot of times that's referred to as a Polluters Pay lawsuit. But what that lawsuit is it's about going after big oil and gas companies that violated the Consumer Protection Act by pretending like they didn't know that their products were causing climate change when they did. And we can prove they had all the evidence that they knew what they were doing. And so that lawsuit is about companies lying about the impact of their product. That's what is all wrapped up in the lawsuit. What we're doing in the legislation, it's not actually about going after them for lying, although we don't love that. It's about getting these companies to compensate the district for the financial damages of climate change itself. So it's a little bit nuanced, but those are slightly different things. And things related to, the lying and the Consumer Protection Act and the misleading of customers, that all fits into the lawsuit. Whereas what we're really talking about is compensation for climate damage. And then just to reiterate some of what Mustafa said around, can we really do this in DC? Of course, we have to acknowledge the reality that we're in right now with the federal government messing in DC's business all of the time. And I can't make promises that they aren't going to mess with DC's business again here. But we really take a position that we can't let that stop us at this point. Right now, we're not at the point where the federal government is keeping DC from passing legislation. And this falls squarely within, the rights that DC has within home rule. And so we don't want to sort of comply in advance and respond to the threat from the Trump administration or from congressional Republicans. And sort of, the threat around DC home rule. We want to fight for DC's right to pass our own laws and govern ourselves. And so we've thought through the strategy and the timing of this campaign to try to do it in a responsible way that builds buy-in. We've thought about the timing of it a bit to try to make it work with hopes that things at the federal level will get better in a couple of years. And so we hope that some of that strategy will mitigate any risk here. But fundamentally, we think it's inevitable that big oil and gas are going to pay for climate damages, just like big tobacco had to. And we need to get started on this fight now. And so that is what we are doing by getting this campaign launched. So if all of that sounds good to you, then we really need you with us. And who is us? Well, this is a campaign supported by a big coalition of organizations. You can see folks who are officially on board right now, but we are still building our coalition. and bringing in lots of organizations across DC that advocate for all kinds of things, environmental justice and climate justice, clean energy, and also all the types of things that we need to fund with the super fund. So housing and all the kinds of city services that we need, as well as just like fair governance and justice. So this is our coalition. If you are a member of an organization that isn't on this list, we would love for you to be a part of our coalition and for your organization to join us. And so we are still recruiting folks to our coalition. And there should be a link in the chat about how to join our coalition and lots of information about how that actually works and what exactly an organization would be signing on to join us. But of course, we also have lots of ways that you can take action right now. So first, if you haven't yet signed on to our petition that says you support polluters paying to clean up the climate crisis, that is the number one thing we need you to do right now. You can scan the QR code that's on the screen, or there should be a link in the chat as well. We are trying to get to 500 petition signatures by the end of this month as our first goal, so that we can show policymakers in DC that there is a crew of folks excited about this. And then from there, we are going to keep growing our movement. And second, you can let us know how you want to stay involved. So the second QR code and the next link you're going to get in the chat is has a drop down of forms, or is a form with drop downs of different ways you can get involved. So lobbying decision makers like council members, talking to your neighbors, hosting events, putting up posters. There's so many different things that you can do, and we need your help no matter what you're the most interested in. So let us know what you might be interested in by filling out the form, and then we can follow up with you. If you select that you're interested in lobbying decision makers, you'll see there's a drop down of some upcoming lobby dates. One is October 30th. The next is in December. And you can RSVP right then and there. If you're interested in putting up posters, you can RSVP for November 8th right then and there as well. So please fill out this form and take action with us on the campaign. We really, really do want to have you all with us. Okay, so we're going to move into the training section of this webinar. But before we do that, this is our campaign launch, and we want to take a moment to celebrate all of us being here. So I'm going to pause my screen share, and we're going to take a quick screenshot of everyone that's here. So if you could come off camera and give us your smiling face for a minute, we would love that.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to take a screenshot and I will tell you 3, 2, 1, smile. All right. I'm going to do 2. We have a lot of people here, so I'm going to do 2 screens. One second. Okay. 3, 2, 1, smile.
Awesome.
And then I'm going to do the second screen. So
Oh.
one more time for everyone. 3, 2, 1, smile. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Great. Thanks for taking a little selfie with all of us. It's great to have evidence that this happened. Moving on into the second kind of half of this launch, we're going to be a little more interactive. If you're tired of listening, there'll be a chance to talk. And yeah, to start off, I guess my name is Isla. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the DC-based organizer with CCAN. And I'm going to be talking a bit about the story of self. So one of the most important things that we all can do to help create the world that we want to see is to be able to very clearly articulate what that world is and why we care about it. And this type of storytelling is the building blocks of creating real change because we, as humans, are social creatures, and we've always used stories to understand the world around us. In organizing, we call these stories the story of self. And for the end of this webinar, we're going to do a training in breakout rooms about how to create your story of self that's focused on making polluters pay. So each of us can learn to tell a story that will move others to take action. We all have stories with challenges, or we wouldn't think the world needed changing. And we all also have stories of hope, or we wouldn't think we could change it and be on this call right now. Although you may not have learned explicitly how to tell stories, you probably have learned intuitively by copying others and like noticing how people respond to you. You know, we can all tell a story. Um, and so to tell a story that will move others to take action, whether we're talking to friends and family or even talking to elected leaders, we need to think about how we can both engage the head and also the heart to activate the hands. What that means is we need to be able to use both facts and data as data, but also stories and emotions to mobilize everyone to act together. So building your storytelling skills is important because it allows us to activate emotions and values and translate these shared values into action because we can, you know, empathize and identify with a storyteller, we can feel the lesson that they're learning. We're not just like hearing about someone's courage, we're inspired by it and inspired to take action. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So there are three basic elements in a story. There is the challenge, the choice, and the outcome, if you really break it down. Um, so your story of self will probably begin with an unexpected challenge for you, something that confronts you with a difficult emotion or an urgent need to pay attention. Um, this challenge is going to lead you to make a choice, such as ignoring this issue or taking action on the issue. For example, joining a group or creating your own group to respond to the challenge. And this will lead to an outcome. Um, so in a couple of minutes, we're going to jump into, I think, 4 breakout groups where you're going to have some time to think about your story of self when it comes to making polluters pay and thinking about what challenges and choices and outcomes that have led to you being on this call and being motivated to take action on this issue. And how can we use these moments to encourage decision makers and leaders to make the right choices too? Um, so when we get in these rooms, I do encourage you all to think about, you know, specific moments that led to where you are right now. We all obviously have so many moments that brought us here and like issues and things that we care about. But I encourage you to lean into one moment and what that what values it brings up for you to tell a compelling story. And just to reiterate, this story of self skill can be used in many different contexts, such as talking to friends and family and encouraging them to take action on issues. You can use this skill when tabling or canvassing and talking to other DC residents about make polluters pay issues. And then you can also use this skill when talking to council members and decision makers and encouraging them to take actions like introducing legislation that you want to see or voting yes on something. And that's why we're doing this training today, because as we mentioned, we'll be doing some talking to council members next week. And I think, yeah, having some time to flesh out these stories will be helpful for having those conversations. So it's time for breakouts. We are gonna get the breakout room set up, and you will all be invited to join a breakout room. There'll be a facilitator for each room that will share an example story and then also walk you through a short spreadsheet that can help you think about your own story. Um, Without further ado, let's join our breakouts.
Okay, awesome. So I hope that that was a good exercise in getting you thinking a little more about why you really care about making polluters pay. I'm going to pass it around to folks to hear a quick highlight from each room. Mustafa, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Yeah, we're having a robust discussion and sharing of personal stories. So thanks to I think we got to almost everybody. Apologies for cutting it off, Ari. But I think the short of it is people are telling calling for both making sure that we have government that can represent and protect us, that is centering the health and climate adaptation for our communities and securing the future for our kids. And so it was great to be in the room where people are thinking about their stories that they can then share with decision makers to influence them. Claire, you are muted.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can't get through a Zoom call without that happening, y'all. It just doesn't happen for me. Okay, well, that sounds like a great discussion. Thanks, Mustafa. I'm going to kick it over to Jacqueline next.
Yeah, we also had a good discussion. Our breakout room, I'll try to summarize the three share outs that I heard from. But like kind of a motivating force for why people want to be involved in this campaign and why the climate crisis concerns them is again kind of like what Mustafa said, how the changes in weather and climate have threatened like the health of family members, of trying to figure out where you want to set up and settle your roots to raise a family. Also, just the fact that the climate crisis feels like such a huge problem that it's hard to tackle like on an individual basis. And the Make Polluters Pay campaign kind of provides a very like tangible way of going about that and puts the onus on the fossil fuel companies who have more than enough of the resources to address it, at least like, locally. And also heard about how this Make Polluters Pay campaign allows us to channel our anger around this issue in an effective way and allow ourselves to be angry about something that we should be angry about, but we don't always have like the outlets for it. And so with this campaign and holding polluters accountable and demanding that they pay back what they've done to us is a way that we can express this anger for the better.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, I definitely relate to that. It's a good way to channel some energy. Okay, let's hear from Lauren, your group.
Yeah, my group also talked about the scale of climate change and how that can bring a lot of climate anxiety. We talked about, formative moments when we were young, when we saw documentaries or got to travel to Glacier National Park, for example. Things like that that really showed the scale and make us very, very anxious. And we talked about how this campaign is a great way to feel better and lessen that anxiety because we're putting our feelings into action and doing something that is going to make a difference.
Amazing. Okay, Isla, send us home.
Yeah, I relate to a lot of what all of y'all were just saying, and I think from my group, I wanted to share a little story that was in our icebreaker. We said, what is something that made you all smile? And we all had really similar themes of grandkids and pets and animals and fall. And it was cool that kind of like came up in the stories of self that we were sharing as well. Thinking about, yeah, how climate will impact future generations and grandkids and the effects, like health effects of climate related issues on our families. I think those were some pretty clear, common themes within our groups. And if I didn't get to hear you, I'm sorry.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks everyone for doing this and starting to think about it. And if we didn't get a chance to share our stories and hear your story tonight, then there are many opportunities for you to continue to share your story, which is why we practice doing it tonight. So, one more time, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight. Again, reminder to sign that petition. It's really important we get as many names as possible. And then you can fill out our form to take action. If you feel a little more practice now that you've had some time to think about your story and develop, one great opportunity that's coming up to actually tell your story is lobbying at the Wilson Building. So we're going to go talk to council members and their offices about this legislation on October 30th. So if you're available then, we would love to see you. Again, if you go to the form and say you're interested in lobbying and then select that date, you'll have RSVP'd and we'll know you're coming. Or you can join us on the 8th to put posters up about polluters pay in Ward 5. And anything on the form that you select that you're interested in doing, we will be following up with y'all in the coming weeks and months as we continue this campaign. So links are in the chat again, and please do fill them out and stay with us. Thank you so much for being here from the beginning. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to learn about our campaign and understand what we're trying to accomplish. I'm really excited to make this happen in DC, and we can't do it without all of you. So it means a lot that you're here, and we hope that we will see you again on the 30th or the 8th or at the many things to come. So thank you so much. And if anyone does have burning questions that you didn't get answered, I'm happy to stay on with folks and answer a couple of questions. But otherwise, please enjoy your night. And thanks again for being here.